universe that we haven't discovered yet?
When I think of the shadow biosphere, I think of life as we don't know it on Earth. So a form of life that emerged at some time on Earth, distinct from the life as we do know it, that is ourselves and all the life that we generally study in biology class and we study the ancient record of in paleontology.
I think it originates from the idea that there's life that's running in parallel to what we typically consider life, that we might be completely clueless about because we've constantly probed for, let's say, DNA in natural environments, and we have a certain expectations that that living things should be encoding their genomic information in the language of DNA nucleotides. But what if there's a form of life that doesn't do that at all, and we're completely blind to it? So in a way, that's the life that is residing in the shadows.
Can there be extremely different forms of life that coexist with us on Earth? And that is the real interesting part about this whole project, is can we actually figure out ways to find these real unknowns?
Science has come a long way to describe nature, but there's so much that we still don't understand. And one of these things might be novel life forms that we haven't found yet because we haven't looked at them.
Getting our hands around shadow life would give us a much better idea of the true diversity of life on Earth and hopefully some hints into how life really originated, which has been one of the great mysteries of science.
So it's important to look for shadow life for the same reasons that it was important for people hundreds of years ago to be looking for new continents, or for us to be looking for new habitable planets. So in part because of the just kind of the revolutionary implications it would such a discovery would have, and in part because we really need to test our understanding of biology and test the limits of our understanding.
The main reason why that's exciting to me is because it's a very similar pursuit. That is, searching for the shadow biosphere on Earth is a similar pursuit to my main job day to day, which is looking for life on other planets, and especially on Mars.
Besides the curiosity, there's the study of evolution per se. We want to know everything, or rather as much as we can, about the evolutionary process. We want to fill in gaps about things about branches of life that we don't know about, which might be these shadow forms that we discover.
Creativity and imagination are real key ingredients of any kind of exploratory endeavor. And in particular, for our study, we really need to design novel assays for culturing organisms, for staining organisms. We can't use existing assays, for example, because we'll continue to find the same things that have already been discovered.
We're trying to develop new methods about a hypothetical cell, which we don't know exists. So you have to be a little bit more creative than traditional scientists, because we have to assume nothing and only rely on tests that have very little bias in them.
So creativity plays more than a role in which methods you're going to use to identify things that you know, but not in trying to imagine how they would look like or what they would do. That's the next step that you need to take afterwards. So it's something that I always say, is like, fall in love with your results, but not with your hypothesis.
How do you look for something if you don't know what it might look like? And so you have to start somewhere. From the accompanying premise, which is something like, we'll know it when we see it. We're good at recognizing life, and so something will draw us in. In many cases, it might be a shape. We're very visual creatures, and so there are shapes that we see around us that suggest to us that biology might be involved.
So we're looking for shadow life in the most extreme environments in the world. So recently we went to the Atacama Desert in Chile. So this is the driest desert in the world, and it's also the oldest desert in the world.
My own research in this project has been involved in trying to find the outer limits of DNA-based life and finding new forms of DNA-based life, whether viruses or bacteria that have never been seen before, and to try to understand a little bit about their roles in the environment.
What we would consider to be kind of analogous to primordial Earth, some hot spring environments with high sulfur content. There's really high pH alkaline lake called Mono Lake that we have collected water from. The Death Valley, which is also extremely dry but sees very sporadic rain.
Electron microscopy allows us to see things that are very, very small, even like beyond the limitations of light microscopy.
So the work that's happening in Grant Jensen's lab with his incredible electron microscopes, they're taking samples from different environments. They're taking thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures. And they're looking at those pictures, and they're just looking for interesting shapes. And there are certain shapes that suggest biology, and there are certain shapes that don't suggest biology. Exactly what are those? Exactly what are the boundaries between a biological shape and a non-biological shape? It's impossible to define. It's a sort of, you know it when you see it. Certain shapes are more biological than others.
There'd be enormous implications sort of philosophically and outside of science as well, because right now the prevailing view is that we're all descended from a common ancestor and life started once, and that would suggest that maybe life started more than once and with different means and managed to coexist without meaningful interaction over billions of years.
Evolution has happened once, it could have happened again, or multiple times. And so the question is, did it happen multiple times? And if it did, what branches did it, or how did it proceed, decay? It could have proceeded in different ways, and it could have led to completely different forms than what we are familiar with.
I think the philosophical implications of the concept of shadow life come back to how we as humans see our role in the context of all other life.
And it also has importance for space travel. So as humans start to, populate other planets, it's extremely dangerous if we go to a planet and don't know what sort of life is there. So having methods that can detect life that we currently don't know about is extremely important for, humans going to other planets and characterizing that planet before humans go there unprotected.
The important thing is success is both direct and indirect in this project. Direct success is we obviously find new kinds of life. Indirect is where we develop assays and methods that can then be used to look at other things that can be used by other scientists in other protocols, and that would also be considered success in many ways. Is while pursuing, and that often happens in science, while you pursue one area, you actually end up doing or generating stuff that would be useful in many different areas.
My greatest hope is that we might someday discover a new kingdom of life, which would be amazing.
Well, of course, finding life that, blows our mind, that of course would be the ultimate success. But I would say that just learning about biology and the limits of biology itself is such a key. It's such a important pursuit.
Being able to change our definition of biology doesn't mean that we have to look on other planets. If we find it on Earth, that's even more groundbreaking, because it's been living here this whole time and we haven't noticed it. So it's sort of the shock of it also makes it kind of interesting, because it's living right beneath our noses, but we haven't really found it yet.
Any science endeavor is a success if you follow scientific method, because eventually you learn the limitations of your plan, which if you report that nicely, you help other researchers to develop better plans in the future.
The fact that we're even talking about shadow life and we have a group of 20 people who regularly gather and we talk about such a novel hypothesis is, to me, it's already success, right? And being able to continue this project onward would be success by itself.
So what you have to do if you're looking for shadow life, or if you're looking for life on other planets, is you have to bring it down to the most fundamental aspects of life as we know it. What are the shapes that we see around us that are indicative of life? What are the chemical reactions that organisms can use? So what are the aspects that all life shares? And can we find one thing in our world that shares those properties but differs in fundamental ways from all other life? So that's the basic challenge. And that's what we're trying to do in NASA. And that's what Boundaries of Life is trying to do.